Oh yeah, welcome back. The sound you hear is my voice and the tappity typing of Bud Elliott of SB Nation Recruiting. It's 5 p.m. Eastern, which means pretty much everything is done except for the final button on Bud's shirt. You look great, Bud.
Appreciate
you look fantastic. But we are here to recap all things signing day with a focus on the Big Ten, Pac-12, and Big 12. We're going to be having guests from all over the SB Nation network on the show to break everything down, looking at the big classes, the big success stories, a couple of the whiff stories, and everything in between. So, to you, when you look around the Pac-12 first, let's start with the Pac-12 and move on to the other conferences. Clear winners of the LA schools. I think that makes sense with how they're able to close on a number of their targets, both locally and nationally. What stood out to you as for the day in the Pac-12 as a whole?
I think UCLA's ability to recruit nationally, go to get a Chris Clark, be a player for Roquan Smith, go get Soso Jamabo out of Texas, and still do well in California. They clearly are preaching the come to California message to kids all across the country, which why not? Southern
great
Cali's
academics,
a great
beautiful
place.
Campus,
Right. USC's dominance within the state also stands out. They get the two kids from Sarah. They land Biggie Marshall from Long Beach Poly. I mean, it's pretty much a domination for USC, and they came very close to knocking off Alabama for the number one class.
Yes, and in particular, USC succeeded today on defense with John Houston, the linebacker from Sarah, with Rasheem Green, a very highly thought of and touted defensive tackle, and then, of course, as you mentioned, Amon Biggie Marshall, the cornerback who is more probably physically ready to play corner on big-level college football teams.
Yeah, I think he's the best corner in the country.
Anybody in the country, yes. So USC, especially with a couple of the hits they take on defense, those are guys that, and because of their scholarship numbers, that they're going to get immediate playing time. We saw the last couple of years with the Dory Jacksons, Sua Gravens, coming in right away as blue-chip defenders.
Right.
UCLA, though, as you mentioned, recruiting nationally, and really doing a great job of continuing that. They've done that these past couple of years under Jim Mora. What are the names for UCLA that not necessarily surprised you, but that they pulled that you think were talented enough to really play anywhere?
I think Chris Clark is one of the best tight ends I saw this year in going around to all these scouting camps. Guy out of Connecticut for a long time. He was committed to Michigan, then he looked at Ohio State and a number of other schools. Had a bunch of great offers. Josh Rosen, who I think is probably the top quarterback in the country. Former tennis star there in Southern California. Really advanced knowledge of the game. Extremely confident player.
Yes, that's a very kind way of putting his personality.
Yeah. I mean, he may rub some guys wrong. He certainly did at some of the camps, but nobody can really deny the talent that he has. Soso Jamabo is a very versatile back, guy that can catch passes. You can swing him out wide. He's also a very good running back, obviously. And then Keyshawn Lucier South is a really interesting pass rusher. He's kind of slight of frame, can probably get to that 240, 250 range eventually, but he is going to need to add some weight.
As an outside linebacker.
Right. You could stand him up. You could play him as a regular defensive end.
Right. Almost similar, maybe a little more slight than Anthony Barr and what he was able to do from that stand-up role.
And longer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Anthony Barr did come in on offense, so a versatile athlete himself. And then here's a shocker, though. UCLA and USC putting together another great class each. Neither of them won the Pac-12 South last year.
No, they didn't.
So they are winning signing days year in and year out, but not necessarily winning consistently enough on the field to win division crowns or even the Pac-12 crown. Arizona has an offensive lineman you really like coming into their class, but they don't make huge waves. They just sort of recruit in Arizona, recruit in Southern California, rely on a lot of good coaching. Oregon and Stanford have been the class of the conference these past few years. Oregon with a really nice class. It's more difficult to pull in just because of their location. Top classes like USC and UCLA, but highlighted by a defensive end you really like in Canton Kamatule. Yeah, so they have a good class that I feel like, even though the talent level isn't as high as some of the elite programs, it really fits what they do really well.
And then in Oregon's case, when almost every single recruiting battle you have to fight is an out-of-state battle, you don't have that luxury of being the state school for these in-state prospects. And that's really tough. I mean, a lot of times that geography matters a whole lot in recruiting, as we see, and a certain number of kids are just unwilling to go more than a 4 or 5 hours drive from home. And that makes it tough for Oregon. They really do a great job relative to the resources that they have around them. I mean, obviously, once you get the kids on campus, the facilities are second to none. It's a great place. The problem is, can you pull a kid from LA all the way out there? Can you get a kid from Texas? Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
All right, well, we're going to come back to the Pac-12, and this is a nice little transition to the team that beat Oregon soundly in the national championship game, because we have Luke Zimmerman on the line. We're going to get into some Big Ten stuff, but Ohio State with a not surprising, very, very good day on the recruiting trail. Luke, when you look at the class that Urban Meyer and staff, minus a key coach in Tom Herman, how do you evaluate what they did, and how nervous were Ohio State fans as they awaited some potential flips?
Well, I think it's kind of an unusual class for Ohio State. The previous three under Urban Meyer were all top 5. This one falls so far to number 6, but didn't necessarily start the day there. The Ohio State, recruiting brain trust closed really strong. They were able to hold off Jim Harbaugh in Michigan to keep a Cass Tech kid from the Detroit area, and Mike Leber. I think that's the story of the day for Buckeye fans. But they also had, a little bit of surprises. KJ Hill, a wide receiver, the best player from the state of Arkansas.
Yep.
I believe Zach Smith, Ohio State's wide receivers coach, called him earlier today. A big play waiting to happen. He wound up joining the class. It wasn't super unexpected, but still a little bit, on the periphery, especially after the Buckeyes missed out on Porter Gustin, who went to USC the other day. However, Ohio State then I think did actually pull a little bit of a surprise in landing 4-star tackle Isaiah Prince. Last year, the Buckeyes missed out on another Prince who wound up going to Maryland. This year, they wind up getting one to come to Columbus. And Urban Meyer said in his press conference today that, a little bit contrary to conventional wisdom, if the Buckeyes have the choice between keeping an elite lineman, be it defensive or offensive, they're going to go ahead and go big there and actually, skim on the skill position guys if necessary, if it comes down to a decision between the two. So the Buckeyes, once again sort of repeated his formula that goes back to Florida in terms of what they did on the offensive and defensive line. A lot of really big guys there. I mean, Kevin Prince is a kid from New Jersey who's very raw, but the physical talent there is already, NFL draft level potential. I mean, the guy's 6'9", 305. Once he grows into that body in a college, or especially an Ohio State high-level strength and conditioning program, I think guys like that are just really going to, block for the likes of Ezekiel Elliott and potentially Weber when, after Ezekiel obviously goes pro after next year. So I think Ohio State fans are going to be happy with the way it closed. They got a couple more, 4-star type guys to elevate the class. And I think, at this point, Urban Meyer, at least at a time in Ohio State, has proven that he can, do some deep talent evaluation. While there are a lot more 3-stars than perhaps Buckeye fans are used to.
Right.
I think that so far, you see the Darren Lee, the Pat Elflein, like Urban Meyer, Cardell Jones even, Ohio State has proven, that this recruiting think tank can identify the deeper guys, even if they don't necessarily have the 4- and 5-star category. All
right, well, let's look at those 4- and 5-star guys, just because those are the big names of the class. And Ohio State is in the enviable position where they're not going to really have to rely on too much from the incoming freshmen. What are the names of guys that you feel like could contribute in some sort of rotation role? Obviously, it appears that most of the starting positions are spoken for after a young team wins the national championship in 2014. What are the names people will know sooner rather than later from this class?
Well, I love it because in each of the previous 2 seasons, Urban Meyer has said, we've got to play the freshmen. We don't have any choice. We're going to have 4 or 5 guys. They're going to be out there. They're going to be in the rotation and it's 2 deep. And that didn't happen. So at least so far through his couple of years in Columbus, we haven't seen a ton of guys who've done anything besides been, real special team standouts. But in terms of guys that we could see sneak into the 2 deep, 3 deep, Draymond Jones, a defensive end from St. Ignatius in Cleveland, I think he's going to surprise some people. I think defensive line has been one area that, going back to Urban Meyer's time at Florida, you saw Carlos Dunlap and some of those guys get into the rotation early. I think he has that kind of potential. Eric Glover-Williams is a kid that I really like. He had a viral fight with a teammate get onto the web last year, and I think that sort of scared the Buckeyes and really some of their fans away from him. There's even talks that they would drop him from the class altogether. But after the long road, he's in the class. He's super talented. I don't know that we'll necessarily see him crack a strong secondary right away, but I think we'll potentially see him, maybe in there sooner than folks would think. And then, the big fish, another guy that Ohio State held off from, I believe, LSU was the only other team that he actually got a national letter of intent from, was Torrance Gibson, the quarterback/athlete. I think given everyone knows Ohio State's incredibly good quarterback problem to have, he's not going to see time there anytime soon. But Urban Meyer's proven with Jalen Marshall that you can take a high school quarterback, put him at H-back in the slot, and figure out some creative things to do with him. And I think that, Ohio State's best chance with Gibson, I don't think it's a bad thing to let him have some snaps and reps at quarterback maybe in a year or two when things are a little bit thinner. But I think their best hope is is get him an H-back, get him thriving and really, learning the position, learning the offense. And if he succeeds there, I think it makes it an easier spell to keep him there. So I think he's a guy. And then I think the one name that, probably the crown jewel of Ohio State's class is Justin Elliott from St. X in Cincinnati. Yes. He's a 5-star linebacker. He's not quite Raekwon McMillan, but, who is, right?
True.
Still a guy that is going to measure up to the A.J. Hawks, the Bobby Carpenters, the James Laurinaitis in terms of just sheer ability. And I think we saw Trey Johnson as a guy who came up from the Georgia area, and he's unfortunately, I think, hanging it up due to injury, but he played as a true freshman, so I think Justin Hilliard can probably, follow in his and Raekwon McMillan's footsteps under Urban Meyer and get some reps there as well.
All right, if I give you an over-under quickly, 25, number of passes Torrance Gibson throws at Ohio State during his career.
55?
25.
For Torrance Gibson?
For Torrance Gibson, number of total pass attempts at Ohio State.
Well, way under.
Okay, there it is.
Under 25. Wow.
Under 25 for his career. There it is. So he will be some sort of slot.
How about 5? Is that
5? There it is. That's even more realistic. All right. Luke, thank you very much. And of course, everybody do check out Land Grant Holy Land for all things Ohio State on the SB Nation Network. You were very high on Ohio State's class, especially considering that the word need is not anything that really applies to their current roster with what they were able to do in 2014. And
a lot of times we see the national champion actually get a bump, not in the class they signed a couple weeks after the national championship,
following year.
But in the following year.
Correct.
Exactly. They're able to go a little more national. They did a really nice job recruiting Ohio, recruiting the Midwest and what they do, but they go down to Florida, to get Torrance Gibson. They really go all over. They got Hilliard out of Cincinnati. It's a really nice class. It's mostly based in the Midwest, and next year we're already seeing guys from all over the country, a little more Florida, a little more New Jersey, and those type of areas become even more interested in the Buckeyes, probably thanks to their success as national champions. So it's a really nice class to have. A lot of very talented athletes.
Yes, and it's one of those things where when you look at what they're able to do in 2014, especially on offense, you look at Ezekiel Elliott. They can now go to guys that have seen Ezekiel Elliott, sophomores, juniors, say, you can be the next Elliott. You can be our next stud running back who carries the ball 35 times to the national championship.
Oh, they already have 2016 Kareem Walker.
Oh, that's right, who committed mid-game in the national championship. So, but as for national recruiting, Ohio State's always going to have that wall up around the state of Ohio. But as for going to Florida, where Urban Meyer has that experience recruiting, that gives them an element. If it's not the running back, it's slot receivers, it's quarterbacks going to the South. Wherever those guys are, Ohio State is back, obviously, to being a national championship threat year in and year out. The Torrance Gibson thing is interesting to me. That he had wanted throughout the process to be a quarterback.
Right.
And he was only sort of really seriously, I know he considered Auburn at one point, Tennessee at one point.
He runs a spread option. Tennessee also does a lot of quarterback run.
Right. And went to Ohio State, and there was sort of a push and pull among the coaching staff about where he should play, what they should recruit him as.
Right.
And he
they recruited
him
as a quarterback.
Right.
Now, Meyer apparently today in the press conference referred to him as an athlete. Now, I don't know if that means he's strictly an athlete or if Meyer is just commenting on his athleticism.
He's hedging,
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that he's going to be successful regardless of how he does, because he picked a system that if he stays a quarterback, which I don't think he will, but if he does, Meyer really relies heavily on QB run game stuff.
Yes.
And if he doesn't, I think he has potential to be one of the best receivers in this class.
There it is. All right, so how do you talk about Ohio State without talking about Michigan if we're doing a college football show? So let's go to Anthony Broome from Maize n Brew. I think I said that all correctly. That was very difficult to say. Who was looking at Michigan's signing class all day today for Maize n Brew. All things considered, with how much time or lack thereof that new head coach Jim Harbaugh had to put together this class, I would say relatively successful, especially at least encouraging looking forward. So how do you evaluate this class with the limited amount of time that this staff had to put together the roster in front of them?
Yeah, Dan, I think they did a nice job. Like you said, the timing of Jim Harbaugh's hire kind of it was right in the middle of a dead period, so they didn't have a whole lot of time to get out there and create relationships like, say, Jim McElwain at Florida has and some of those other guys out there. But they covered a lot of ground. When Harbaugh came in, they had 6 commitments. They ended up with 8 more. And in a 3-week span, considering him and his staff were traveling throughout the entire nation and trying to flip kids committed to other schools, it's pretty impressive. And I think they finished today on a semi-high note. They whiffed on a few guys at the top of their board, but it's going to happen. It's just part of the game, and I think they did a nice job closing this thing out.
All right, what are some of the names, obviously, as Harbaugh molds the roster and the depth chart in his own image from this class that you could see contributing next year? Obviously, quarterback looks to be very much in flux as they sort of transition to a very specific kind of scheme under Harbaugh and his coaching staff. I believe 2 quarterbacks come in who are very similar pro-style quarterbacks, one significantly larger than the other. And all over the field, it looks like there is talent coming in that should compete for rotation time. So what names should we know?
Right at the top, I think the guy, like you just mentioned, the quarterbacks, Zach Gentry is the 4-star kid that they flipped from Texas. He has the look of a guy that's going to factor into this quarterback battle pretty early. He fits what Harbaugh likes to do on offense. He's got a big arm, can move the pocket, make plays with his feet when he has to. He's definitely going to factor into that battle come fall camp. Alex Malzone is already on campus, another 4-star quarterback. They like him a lot still. I like what he brings to the table, and he should, him and Gentry will have an interesting little thing going on come the fall. I like Brian Cole, the athlete. I think he's more one of the more underrated athletes in the Midwest, but definitely in all of college football, to be honest with you. They have him listed as a wide receiver. It's going to take some time to kind of get him going in there, but I like him as a guy that could maybe step in and play early. And then, tight end depth is kind of a concern right now. They missed on Chris Clark, went to UCLA. They were able to bring in Tyrone Wheatley Jr., who's that was a big way for them to finish out National Signing Day, and we'll see what happens with him. But those would be the guys right off the bat I would say have a chance at playing early.
What do you think, if anything, that the strategy that Harbaugh took with he and his staff canvassing the country will say about how they plan on recruiting moving forward? Is there a specific region? Are there specific kinds of players they looked at in this short window? Is there anything we can glean from really the 2 or 3 weeks that he had to put together this class as we look forward to the 2016, 2017 classes?
Yeah, well, I think the thing you saw with where the staff has had it, throughout the last few weeks is that there was a lot of guys that they were talking to in California, a lot of guys down in Texas, and they have 3 guys that in their class now that are committed from the state of Florida. So, those are the kind of the pipelines you have to tap into to be a national recruiting power. I think the thing that a lot of these guys share is just their passion for the game, and a lot of them are hard-nosed guys that want to compete, and obviously the guy that they have calling the shots there is a big believer in that. And while it won't be the most highest-ranked class, I think they did a nice job filling their needs and kind of filling what Harbaugh's looking for in his players.
All right, Anthony, thank you very much for your time. Michigan certainly, with how lopsided the Big Ten can be at times. With Ohio State, Wisconsin's had a lot of success at the top. Nebraska's been sort of up and down. Michigan State has been at the top, but the rest of the conference, certainly on the recruiting trail, the talent level, there's a huge discrepancy. It falls off a cliff after those, basically Michigan State and Ohio State at the moment. So with what Michigan was able to put together, first of all, who do you like from this class? And to you, again, who can contribute right away? What are some of the names of the guys you like?
I think Brian Cole, like Anthony said, is going to take a little time to understand how to play receiver. But he's also a guy that if you work to get him the ball in space, we know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. He wants to run the football, pound the rock, throw off play action. It's not that hard to run routes off play action, right? Just be fast, get downfield. Cole's a guy who is extremely athletic, would stand out as an athlete really anywhere in the country. I think that he has potential to make some big plays for them. Maybe not be a great player initially, but make some big splash plays. And then Zach Gentry, the quarterback, was a guy that a lot of teams like down the stretch. Michigan, the big, strong arm type quarterback like they're used to having. And if he's able to go in there and win that battle, he's got a big arm.
Do you anticipate Michigan being in on national battles sooner rather than later? Because obviously you've looked at 2016. Greg Madison was retained on that staff, and he has a lot of experience recruiting down in the Southeast. So do you look at Michigan as having that same strategy as he just mentioned of looking to Florida, looking to Texas? Have they already? I mean, look, they pulled in a 4-star quarterback from New Mexico, so that's as out of the way as it gets. So you anticipate sooner rather than later for Michigan to get back to recruiting nationally?
Michigan went and won a battle today for Shelton Johnson, a 3 or 4-star defensive end out of Delray Beach, Atlantic, and beat Florida State and Miami for him.
Yes.
That's a big-time win. He's not a top 250 type kid, but it's still a kid that both those schools absolutely wanted, and Virginia Tech, and they managed to beat him.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's going to be just just the personalities of Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh in the same conference and controlling that rivalry is going to be fantastic. And I would imagine the talent level will be back to Ann Arbor much sooner than people realize, because there's already a lot there. Jabril Peppers is somebody I'm very excited to watch. Anyway, a team we did not mention, but put together actually a really nice class, perhaps a little bit louder early on in the process, didn't close with a ton, but Penn State is a team that is very happy to be off of recruiting sanctions, that has a good recruiter at head coach and has a staff that seems to be tireless. So let's go to Nick Polak, who covers Penn State recruiting for Black Shoe Diaries on the SB Nation Network. All things considered, with how the season went and the ups and downs of everything on and off the field, I would assume you and the Nittany Lion fan base are relatively pleased that Penn State was generally, outside of perhaps quarterback, able to keep together what looks to be a very, very good class.
Absolutely. I mean, I would use the word overjoyed. I mean, to go from a 7-6 season to according to the 247 composite, number 14 class in the country with 13 of the 25 guys being 4-stars is phenomenal. I mean, the main goal of last year's class and this year's class has been just to build back that quality depth that they used to have that got depleted from the sanctions that you mentioned. I mean, last year they started 2 converted defensive tackles at left guard and right guard the first couple games of the season. So depth has really been a huge issue. And one of James Franklin's kind of favorite quotes that he threw around was, "We have great players, we just need more of them."
Right.
I mean, I know it sounds simple, but that quality depth was kind of the main goal for this class, and I mean they killed it in that regard.
There are 2 big offensive tackles in Sterling Jenkins and Paris Palmer already enrolled, I believe, in State College. Do you anticipate them stepping in right away and contributing, whether it's in a starting or rotation role, or are they more of project cases to you?
Paris Palmer, for sure, should. I mean, if all things go according to plan, should earn either the right tackle or left tackle job this season. I mean, he's coming in as a JUCO commit from Lackawanna, who've produced just a ton of high-quality offensive linemen over the years, and especially with incumbent starter Donovan Smith leaving early for the NFL. There's a huge hole at left tackle. Right tackle got better as the season went on with Andrew Nelson playing out there, and he got better, but they really need someone to step up into that role, and Paris Palmer is definitely the guy to do so. Sterling Jenkins, I mean, it would take a minor miracle for him to see the field as a freshman. He is someone who needs a ton of seasoning still. He's extremely projectable. He has a giant frame. He shows good skills with pass blocking already, shows some decent moves in his run blocking, but he's definitely one that, I mean, him getting on campus early was huge. Getting to work with Herb Hand as early as possible was a huge plus. He definitely needs a lot more work before he sees the field, but if all things go according to plan, he very well could be a starting left tackle for 3 seasons.
And when you look at what Penn State was able to accomplish last season on the field, defense certainly did not appear to be any sort of consistent issue, as they get a ton out of especially their front 7. With what Penn State loses on defense and what they are bringing in, a pair of talented corners, all over the field there seems to be talent coming to State College. Who do you anticipate being good enough to pick up a very good defense, a very good defensive playbook for Penn State and actually see the field early on, if anybody?
The 2 positions that I see anyone from the 2015 class stepping in right away would be corner and defensive end. Like you said, at cornerback, John Reed and Garrett Taylor are a phenomenal pairing of cornerbacks for this class. I mean, John Reed comes in with really outstanding technique for anyone, especially for a high school senior. And he's my pick to earn that early playing time first out of the 2, especially because Garrett Taylor's coming off the injury.
Right.
But I could very well see John Reed stepping into at least a nickel role. Maybe not right away as the season starts, but certainly as it progresses. I mean, they showed last season that they're not afraid to play freshmen in that role. Christian Campbell got a lot of run out there. Grant Haley got a ton of run out there. So it wouldn't be surprising at all to see either one. I would go with John Reed over Garrett Taylor.
Excellent.
And the other spot would be defensive end with Ryan Buckles,
Right.
standing at 6'6". I mean, he's an absolute monster of a human being. They don't have a ton of depth there anymore after Deion Barnes left early for the NFL, C.J. Lanning graduated. There's certainly an opportunity for Ryan Buckles to come in and earn some playing time right away.
Excellent. Nick, thank you very much. Very curious to see what Penn State is able to do as they restock that roster, getting over the sanctions. Just because, yes, we talked about the talent level. If they continue to recruit like this, they will be right alongside Michigan and Ohio State. They probably need to figure out offense, I would say, a little bit more. But yes, as the offensive linemen come in, like if Jenkins turns out well as a project, it appears to be that they're going to be in a very good place.
When you have a quarterback you like a lot in Christian Hackenberg, right?
Yeah.
I think most people like him. Their line last year, pass protection was atrocious.
Yes.
And they really couldn't run the ball either.
It was a patchwork line, yeah.
So people knew they were going to throw the ball 40 or 45 times a game, and they really didn't want to. James Franklin, if you look at his history at Vanderbilt, is not an air raid guy. He's not looking to throw the ball that much. They just couldn't run the ball at all.
Right.
Paris Palmer has the frame and the size to come in there and just help shore up that pass protection a little bit. And that's probably the one area on the team with the greatest opportunity for improvement year to year.
Yes, if the pass protection and the run blocking get better, year over year, it's going to, as you said, it's going to be so good. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, who jumps out to you? Obviously, Wisconsin goes through the coaching change that they did. Nebraska loses a few kids after their coaching change. Anybody doing interesting things? Michigan State loses Pat Narduzzi, but they bring in, I know, a running back you really like at Michigan State. Who stands out to you at this point in the Big Ten as improving their sort of place in the hierarchy?
You know, we actually have a graphic for this. I think Michigan State, to me, stands out because they've been winning on the field for a while now.
Yes.
But you're slowly starting to see their recruiting improve. And I think that's important. They take that step in recruiting as Michigan is able to go and bring in Jim Harbaugh and most likely upgrade over Brady Hoke, I would have to think at this point. So Michigan State is starting to get some good players, not only on defense, but also on offense, which is really going to help them.
That's key.
And getting Larry Scott in is a big deal. I think he's a very good running back, somebody that they...
Great conference commissioner.
Well...
Larry Scott. Shifty.
But this Larry Scott is not going to run the ball in China.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
But that Larry Scott's going to broadcast Pac-12 games. They lose, who was their running back last year?
Jeremy Langford.
They ran the heck at him. Larry Scott is a big guy. I mean, 6'2", about 225, 230.
Physically prepared.
He has the ability to pound the rock, and I think he can carry the load even if they want to load him up as a true freshman.
Excellent. And I know Wisconsin, there's a tight end that came in, Peniston, that you like a lot, just as some guy who that's a Wisconsin dude. Yeah. That's a dude who is going to get open, he's going to catch everything up the seam, and he is going to do great things for the Badgers. All right. We're going to talk a little bit more early impact Big Ten guys later on, but right now we're going to shift to the Big 12 because we have not only Burnt Orange Nation's Westcott Everett's, but we have SB Nation Recruiting's Westcott Everett's. Knows what he's talking about. We're going to start with UT. We're going to start with Texas, who it's the first full cycle for Charlie Strong, and what he's been able to do has been pretty impressive late. I know they went after Kyler Murray, but when you look at the top of the class Westcott, the Texas and Charlie Strong have been able to put together, do you find what he was able and the staff what they were able to do to be satisfactory, or is there a bit of a letdown still because of the end of the quarterback cycle for the Longhorns?
Yeah, I think there's just a little bit of a letdown, if only for the reason that Kyler Murray possibly would have brought guys like Marcus Lodge and Dalen Mack with them.
Right.
But I think overall, when you look at this Texas recruiting class, when you look at the top, guys like Malik Jefferson, top player in the state. Texas hasn't landed the top player in the state since 2010. Top outside linebacker in the country. Texas hasn't landed a player in that position since Jordan Hicks in 2010. So one player you're talking about, a lot of historical accomplishments for Texas. They were able to land Kyle Loxley on Monday, got him to flip from Florida State. Sorry about that, bud. Texas needs him a little bit more, I think. But, Friday, two big cornerback commits, two of the biggest cornerback commits that I think Texas has really had since Aaron Williams about 7 years ago, I believe, class of 2008.
Right.
So when you look at those types of things, there are a lot of really historical accomplishments, kind of as I mentioned. And, Texas managed to pick up 6 guys in the last week. During the stretch from 2006 until 2011, Texas only got 4 guys total in the last week of recruiting. So Charlie Strong really showing off his relentlessness on the recruiting trail. Ended up flipping 9 guys that were committed to other schools in total.
All right, when you look at the specific positions and the guys that they were able to land in this class as a whole and as of late, Do you feel like he addressed the right things? Obviously, there was a ton of offensive line attrition over the course of the year. Are you happy that gaps are being filled in appropriately for Texas to improve in the short term rather than the long?
Yeah, definitely. Only landing one defensive tackle is a little bit of a disappointment, but talking about the offensive line, Texas landed 7 guys there. 4 of them are enrolled early. Texas really just lacking for depth at the position. They didn't have guys that they could throw at it. They lost 2 of the guys that were supposed to be their starting tackles within the first week of the season. They lost their starting center within the first week of the season, and they didn't have very many options at that point. And then moving over to the linebacker position, they picked up a number of guys there, even in addition to Jefferson. Anthony Wheeler, physical freak. I mean, the kid, when he was like 15 years old, looked like a grown power lifter, basically. So pretty ridiculous guy on the hoof there. And Texas lost both of their starting linebackers last year, so they need guys to come in there early. And Jefferson's already on campus right now with helping Texas recruit. That's big for the Longhorns as well.
Do you think Charlie Strong leaving the state of Texas, especially going to Florida, obviously went to New Mexico for Gentry before he flipped to Michigan, do you think that's a clear sign that his recruiting strategy is going to differ to various extremes from what Mac Brown looked to do for the majority of his time in Texas, that it was sort of lock up everybody on junior day and love all of the 4 and 5 stars, and that's our class?
Yeah, no question about it. Strong has those great ties with Florida, especially South Florida, from his time at Florida. Was still able to recruit there well when he was at Louisville. Teddy Bridgewater, obviously a South Florida guy out of Miami. I think a lot of South Florida guys are willing to leave, and Chris Vaughn did a great job, the Texas defensive backs coach, recruiting that state too. That's an area that Strong will continue to go back to, and I think just in general, he's willing to go anywhere in the country if he can't fill his needs in Texas. That's something that Mac Brown wasn't really very willing to do.
All right, and when you look around the Big 12, obviously it's a conference among pretty much every conference that looks to raid the state of Florida. So when you look at the conference as a whole, who else stands out as for putting together impressive classes, whether or not it was from getting commitments from guys within the Lone Star State? Who jumps out outside of Texas from the Big 12?
I think Oklahoma is a program that's now recruiting much more nationally. They were, just a couple of years ago, they're very focused on Texas recruiting.
Yes.
Getting boxed out a little bit in California, but they were able to land some big guys. Linebacker Arthur McGinnis yesterday committed. So some nice additions for Oklahoma down the stretch. They're able to fill some needs. At the Army Bowl, they were able to go up to Canada and pick up Neville Gallimore, a guy that can really hold things down in the middle of that 3-4 defense that they're running for Oklahoma. That was a big addition for them as well about a month ago.
That's international. I mean,
that's international edition, yes.
International, yeah, international for sure.
All right, and Texas A&M, while not in the Big 12, puts together a very nice class, has a couple of decommitments along the way, but gets a reaffirmed commitment from Daylon Mack. Anybody beyond sort of, you mentioned Kyler Murray early on, who looks like he'll be sitting down for at least a little bit behind Kyle Allen, but beyond Murray, beyond Mack, who do you think could contribute right away for the Aggies as they look to build upon a lot of attention in the SEC, but perhaps not winning divisions in the SEC?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough question. I think they may need a little bit of help backing up on the defensive line. James Lockhart is a guy that, is a top defensive end in the state of Texas. He's a guy who contributed early. And then I think looking at the secondary, they have some guys from East Texas who have a lot of talent there who could have to end up playing early. Justin Dunning could eventually end up being more of an outside linebacker type. Larry Pryor, really great all-around athlete out of Sulphur Springs. Ronnie Elam, I think, will probably need a little bit more time. But another guy that I have to talk about who could come in and contribute early is Christian Kirk, one of the top wide receivers in the country. Really dynamic, kind of a small slot guy, really close friends with Kyler Murray, and probably one of the guys that, since he enrolled early, I think helped keep Murray in the class for the Aggies.
All right, Westcott, thank you very much for your time. Everybody do check out Westcott on Burnt Orange Nation and all the things he does, covering recruiting in the southwest region of the country for SB Nation Recruiting. Big 12. Another conference that sort of seems top-heavy just because of Oklahoma and Texas. Baylor actually had a very nice year highlighting the class with Jarrett Stidham, who could be the most talented quarterback in this class.
Some people like
Certainly,
number one.
As a dual threat guy, could be the best dual threat. He and Kyler Murray within the state of Texas doing a great job. So Baylor looks to be building in a very similar way, a ton of athletes coming into Waco. But Texas, Charlie Strong, somebody you're very familiar with how he's recruited in the Southeast. Actually, we have a clip. We have clips of Malik Jefferson because we're going to look at some Big 12 early impact guys. Yes, this is ridiculous.
Malik Jefferson looks like a young Derek Brooks.
Unfair. You'll see burst. Burst.
He ran. I think it was like a 4.4 flat or something at the opening. I remember
look how outside he is.
I was standing next to him and his mom at the opening, and he look at him just hawk down that dude, and the closing speed is unreal.
No football is safe. Yeah.
And he flashed the scorecard with him running that 4.4 to his mom, and I was like,
yes.
Well, you kind of double took. You're like, can I take a picture of that? Hold on a second. And good playing strength, has the ability, and I think the frame to add more weight. Right. But with this guy, it's just you shouldn't be this big and this fast at this age. This is not natural.
As you can see, he is living in backfields. There's not a play here that he isn't spotlighted and he isn't making plays in the backfield.
Really quickly into the backfield. Exceptional closing speed. You can blitz him. Also, I think in Charlie Strong's scheme, they run a lot of those 3-3 zone blitzes.
Yes.
That's a guy that can cover a lot of ground. I mean, just tremendous range as a linebacker and a good hitter, and I mean, it's Charlie Strong's defense.
Yes, and as we look around the Big 12 at early impact guys, Braden Fehoko from Texas Tech, not the usual landing spot for a giant Hawaiian high school player, but he ends up in Lubbock for Cliff and should immediately, with how bad that defense has been, he should immediately contribute. Anybody else, when you look around the conference, I know there's the D.D. Westbrook at Oklahoma. As that they move to more of an air raid or a mobile air raid system under Lincoln Riley coming over from ECU.
And they weren't happy with their receiver play last year.
Right. So outside of Sterling Shepard.
Right. So getting D.D. Westbrook in to play receiver there as a JUCO guy, knows how to run routes, knows where to be, knows the spots, can catch the football. At least will give them, I think, a dependable target. It may not be a superstar, but they're going to be throwing the ball a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, and all over the Big 12, of course. West Virginia going into the state of Florida, which is not a surprise. Something that has been happening for years and years, always looking for the next Tavon Austin.
Tyreek Cole can be a true lockdown corner if he's got his head on straight in a conference that throws the football a ton. A guy who's once committed to Florida State, a true talent. In my opinion, strictly on the field, one of the best corners in the country.
Yes, and TCU, another team, obviously, will start the season as a top 5 team. They return 19 or 20 of their 22 starters, so not a lot of guys in their class. And it's actually a pretty good class coming in for TCU. It's a top 25-ish class for the Horned Frogs, so that's going to pay dividends down the line.
They always do well in the Dallas Metroplex area.
Always doing well, TCU, so that's going to be very exciting to watch. So yes, the Big 12, even though the talent level can be skewed, and Texas still is building up general talented depth, the Big 12 should get better and better as we see more and more teams recruiting and keeping guys close by.
And we saw former Big 12 teams, A&M, Missouri, today, both sign 5 stars.
Yes.
You know, what would the Big 12 look like if they had not lost those 2 programs?
Yes, so I'm sure there's a lot of Big 12 offensive line coaches who are very happy they do not have to see Missouri's defensive line and haven't had to these past few years. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. I think Texas flipped an Oregon kid, which wasn't the best probably for the Ducks.
No,
but no, they needed to build that secondary, losing Quandre Diggs, bringing in the 2 corners that they bring in, Boyd and Hill. I believe they look to be very good. And Oklahoma, yes, they made big staff changes, and their recruiting class is sort of a clear indicator that they are very serious about the direction that they're heading. And
I think with Texas, really, their recruiting class was more skewed in terms of the elite talent, more towards the defensive side of the football. But at least that's going to allow them to tread water for a little bit while Charlie's able to say, hey, we already play elite defense. All we need to pair with that is the offense. Come play for us on that side of the ball.
Don't turn the ball over. Just make simple progress. All right, let's go out west. Let's go to the team that perhaps maybe had I was going to say the best day, but it's arguable that USC, with how they were able to close.
For sure.
USC definitely had the best day with how well they were able to close on Biggie Marshall, John Houston, Rasheem Green, Porter Gustin this week, Osa Messina a couple weeks ago. Evan, how you feeling as somebody covering USC? Do you ever get tired of typing in the word star?
No, I certainly do get tired of typing it every once in a while.
Okay.
But it's funny because these last 2 years, there's been so many of them. Literally, just compared to recent years, there's so many 5 stars and 4 stars out there. It's just a lot of kids.
How much closer does this class, especially with how well they were able to do on defense, get USC to the point where yes, they're going to have depth issues just because they're still reeling from some of the sanctions, to a team where like they've completely survived them and it doesn't appear to matter? How much closer does that get them?
I think actually at first there's a lot of guys they just have to replace. So
yes.
You look at Hayes Pollard, you look at Josh Shaw and Leonard Williams, 3 starters who were all pretty highly recruited out of high school, and now you bring in the next crop, as you mentioned, with those kids, and I think that's where it really starts. You have to find kids who can start, and I think Imam Marshall can maybe start freshman year early on.
Right.
Rasheem Green battling an injury, so we'll see how he comes back, but I think those kids can compete for spots right away just because of, like you mentioned, the depth, and that's a big part of it. So when you have big-name starters, it just allows the other kids who maybe weren't as highly recruited to get more reps and things of that nature.
And the big name position group that they were able to put together and solidify today and this week was linebacker, of course, with Porter Gustin, John Houston, and shortly, or a little while ago, Osa Messina. And with the loss of Hayes Pollard, who has been the heartbeat of that defense for so long, how quickly can those guys get on the field? And is it just a matter of when, not if?
No, absolutely. I think when is the question. It's interesting because I noticed a lot of USC fans are bringing up the comparisons to the great linebackers of the Pete Carroll eras.
Yep.
You have the Ray Malalugas, the Clay Matthews, and I'm just thinking back now to a Sports Illustrated photo I saw of the 3 of those guys kind of dominating for USC's title run the year after. And then now thinking about it now with those 3, you imagine maybe in a year or 2 when all 3 of them are starting and getting a lot of playing time, that I could definitely see them being probably all 3 starting and then getting USC to a level at their linebacking core where it's one of the best in the Pac-12.
Is this a defense now stocked with talent, Sua Cravens, especially the sort of back 7 or back 8, depending on the formation they're in, with Adoree Jackson, with Sua Cravens, as I just mentioned, with Marvell Tell and Akili Ross, the 2 guys that are coming in. Is this a USC defense good enough to perhaps make up for some of the coaching errors we've seen on both sides of the ball, where there's just a situation where there's too much talent not to win?
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing. I could even argue there were multiple games this past year where, if not for a couple of blunders here and there, and maybe coaching or just decisions, this team could probably have been 10-2, maybe 9-3 of that nature. But unfortunately, I think that's the biggest thing. So regardless of whether you have 5 stars or 4 stars, you still have to put them in position to win, and they have to make the adjustments. So I think when you have a guy maybe like Imam Marshall and then obviously Marvell Tell, who maybe could start at safety right away, I think they have that type of potential where you have to teach them, well, here's how you finish out a game. Here's how you make a tackle in the 4th quarter, or in certain cases, jump for a Hail Mary in the end zone. And I don't mean to be rude, but it still sticks with us for a little while here in SoCal. But obviously, yeah, you have to make sure they're in position to make plays. And then if that happens, you would only imagine that, it really is like that the dam's ready to break. At some point, with that much talent, you can't not win games, if that makes sense.
All right, and Cody Kessler is as sure a thing coming back at quarterback perhaps as there is in the country, but behind him, now we add 2 more quarterbacks in Sam Darnold and Ricky Town. Add to that Max Brown, the formerly blue chipper that came in a couple of years ago. Looking forward, how confident are you in USC's quarterback position, a position that one could argue was as premier a spot to be in college football? Are we still in the present tense, or is that a past tense thing until proven otherwise?
I definitely agree with you. Cody is a for sure lock for this year. I think moving forward, Max Brown's going to be the go-to guy after Kessler leaves next year. And Brown, it's been a work in progress for him. I think a lot of it has to do with just adjusting to Sark's system, which, although it's similar to what he did in high school, the college game was a little overwhelming for him early on. But no, I absolutely love what both Darnold and Ricky Town do for USC. Darnold's one of those kids who can make plays with his feet. He's a very versatile athlete, and that allows him to be successful. I think Town has all the natural throwing abilities that you're looking for. So it's funny, whereas we saw a few years ago with Kessler and Max Whittick, who's now at Hawaii, competing for the job 2 years ago, I think the same type of thing could happen now with Darnold and Town coming in.
Excellent. Evan, thank you very much for your time. Be sure to check out Conquest Chronicles. They do a fantastic job.
They do.
And Evan is going to take our jobs.
And one thing I think to think about is, given their limited depth, what were their practices like? Were they able to practice with a certain level of intensity?
Full tackling.
How many reps could they do? A lot of these programs it's rep. If you ever go to a college ball practice, it's extremely fast paced. They rep a ton of stuff. If you have limited depth, may not be able to rep as much stuff. certainly had coaching errors this year. There's no doubt. You have to jump for a Hail Mary. That is very much important at the end of a ball game. But given more depth now, and as they get more talent in the program, they may have more competitive practices with a little bit more reps. It might help some of those issues.
Yeah, that was the thing that was very clear with USC. When you have, just starters, when you have starters and some backups, it seems like the preparedness in big spots against Utah, against Arizona State, even they get away with the win from Arizona. It just seemed like they panicked at the end of games. And it wasn't all on the coaches. It was players that just hadn't been put, I guess that is on the coaches, put in proper spots in practices. They didn't seem prepared. And it will be interesting when they have those numbers to cycle in, to play against true scout teams, which I don't think people realize how huge that is week in and week out, to play against talented scout teams.
Exactly.
That's going to be huge for USC. And now USC brings in so much talent. Where do you compare Amon Marshall, this year's best corner, to previous top corners these past 2 or 3 years?
I think he's on the level of Jalen Ramsey in terms of physicality.
Okay.
May have a little bit better agility. I think Ramsey probably has a little bit better top-end speed.
Right.
We saw Ramsey make a big-time impact from the slot corner position.
Yes.
Big is a guy that can come up and make big-time tackles, can also cover, and a real asset in the red zone because he's going to get physical with you. You really can't throw the fade on him. And
we're seeing now that he's
exactly. So just
don't come near him.
That's a devastating hit. That'll probably be flagged in college too. But and a guy that, when you actually hear him talk, he sounds a little bit like Mike Tyson, which is really funny. I'm sure USC fans are going to love when he throws out those knockout blows and then sound like Mike.
Great, and as you can see, the athleticism.
Skills. Yeah, I mean, just nobody even really comes close to touching him there. One guy got within a couple steps. Just a really, really great athlete. Technique, I think, is good, but can get better. Look at the recovery speed. The guy put an okay move on him with the stopper out there and stop and go.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so USC obviously in a great place and lock up, the Sarah kids, Sarah High School, which they've traditionally done very well with. Shocker that USC does well at Gardina's Sarah High School. But across town, UCLA, we talked about it in the early show this morning just because they were pulling kids from all over the country, but locking up everybody. And UCLA does a great job in-state, nationally, but does this kind of success surprise you, or at this point, recruiting success isn't a surprise, but they need to translate it?
It's been building, and I think UCLA is one of those programs, and we saw them go all over the country today, like we just talked about at the open of the show. They are going to have, I think, translated into more wins on the field. Win 10, 11 ball games. Yeah. Win the Pac-12 South. Maybe win the Pac-12. It could be kind of wide open next year. A lot of teams have a shot, most likely. With Oregon losing Mariota, it
the balance
sort of
of power could shift.
Right, exactly, because he was such a special player for them. It still won't be easy, but I do think if they want to sustain this level of recruiting longer term, especially with what Rich Rod's doing in Arizona and what Arizona State is doing and all the programs in California and Cal coming up a little bit, you do need to probably win a few more ball games on the field and stay in that kind of national conscience. But overall, I mean, I think it's really impressive what they've done.
There really are no easy weeks in the Pac-12. Even Colorado is giving a lot of teams fit. So week in and week out, the Pac-12 very tough, which brings us to, once again, Jamie UYEYAMA from Pacific Takes now, excuse me. He was on earlier talking about Notre Dame, but also runs recruiting for Pacific Takes and all things out west recruiting. So LA schools, who are you giving? It seems like a coin flip. Who won the day between UCLA and USC?
You have to go with USC.
I think so.
Sure. Sheer star power. It's pretty ridiculous. And also the fact that they got all the guys they wanted from LA. They have those same feeder schools that feed into them. Sarah, Long Beach Poly. They landed Biggie Marshall, Rasheem Green, John Houston. All those guys went there, and it got kind of swept under the rug. But Kevin Scott, a D tackle who just kind of blew up late in the process, who looks like a stud too. Yep. I think they had a great day. I mean, not taking away from UCLA's day. They had a phenomenal day as well. But USC, it's almost stupid how well they did.
All right, well, let's start at the top of the Pac-12 just because Oregon is the defending champ and has been the defending power for a number of years now, coming off of a national championship berth. How well did they do? Obviously, the big loss is Marcus Mariota, but how well did they do in finishing out their class? Do you think that they were able to sign kids that fit in with what they've been able to do in Eugene so well?
They've signed the guys on offense that fit extremely well.
Taj Griffin, who's coming off a knee injury, but he's an explosive kid from Georgia, running back. Malik Levet, Kirk Merritt out of Louisiana. All three of those guys are like a touchdown waiting to happen. They're just explosive kids. They can all compete for the returner spots. They're all that kind of hybrid running back slot, the Anthony Thomas types. I'm not putting them in that speed category, but maybe Griffin actually might be. But they really did a great job bringing in that skill talent. Alex Alfadil from Missouri as well, another really good early enrollee kid. And then the big thing is that Travis Waller, the quarterback from Servites, who tremendous dual threat. I don't think he's going to be ready to play right away, and which is why they're probably hoping that Vernon Adams comes over. But I think he's going to be a tremendous player down the road.
All right, another school with a very defined, in a different, if not opposite way, strategy and scheme, Stanford. Stanford is a team that has in previous years loaded up on very much pro-style quarterbacks, a lot of big offensive linemen. I'm assuming they have not varied from that mode of recruiting. What were they able to do this year under David Shaw, who's been a very good recruiter for the Cardinal?
I really like the way Stanford finished their class. They just have a bunch of Stanford kids, in terms of, I'm not talking about in terms of academics, because obviously they all got to get into school there, but I'm talking about in terms of toughness and just guys who tackle well, just fundamentally sound football players. They brought in 3 really good safeties. Justin Reed was the guy they added today. Frank Bunkum, the 4th.
Great name.
Ben Edwards, a really hard-hitting safety out of Jacksonville, out of Trinity Christian, really good program down in Jacksonville. And they not only did it, that Trent Irwin is the highest ranked guy in their class. 5-star receiver by some things, but a composite 4-star. But he's just a guy, he always gets open. He can catch everything that's thrown his way. He's just a stud. And the other thing, obviously, with the line, too, Nick Wilson, not a guy who gets talked about a lot. Guards never get talked about a lot.
Right.
But the kid is mean. He is mean.
Nice.
He wants to finish people, wants to put them on their back. He's a big-time stud. Really, really like that Nick Wilson kid.
And despite the name brands that USC and UCLA are and will continue to be, the Pac-12 South did not run through LA in 2014. Both Arizona and Arizona State were in very good position to win the division. Arizona, of course, finally takes the Pac-12 South. How did both of those schools do out in the desert?
Arizona State, they had a great class, but I think it kind of finished a little bit with whimper, even though they got a couple of nice pickups today, specifically with Joseph Wicker, who's really good 3-technique defensive tackle.
Right.
Bringing in a great quarterback in Brady White this class. Obviously, they would have loved to add his teammate, Trent Irwin's teammate in high school. They're able to hold on to Jason Lewis from Ocean Lakes in Virginia. Very good, versatile player, but they were after the Porter Gustins, all those, the Rasheem Greens, all those big guys USC was going for. It seemed like they finished second or third for all those guys, and they could have had a really, really amazing class. As it stands, they still have a good class. It just didn't turn out as hoped. All
right, Jamie, thank you very much for your time. Be sure to check out his work on Pacific Takes. They do a great, I really like, he and Avi do a really good job at Pacific Takes. The Pac-12. So we saw some early impact guys, if we can see it one more time. Just because Josh Rosen could be filling in, or not filling in, but could be the new quarterback with Brett Hundley gone at UCLA, surrounded by a ton of talent. Trent Irwin, as reliable a receiver, I would say, that there is in the country.
David Shaw, they called him the best route runner in the country.
Yep.
I have to agree, because athletically he's not a burner. He's not the most physical guy, but really understands how to set people up. When he comes out of his stance, everything kind of looks the same. You really don't know what route he's running until he makes his breaks. That really helps him right there. As we already said, Rosen and just the USC guys. Marshall is a dude who, if he had skipped his
here's
senior
Rosen,
year,
by the way,
Josh Rosen.
Not throwing against Biggie Marshall.
Now, I will say, the thing about Rosen that is tough to pick up off some of his high school tape is that he plays on a very good high school team.
Yes.
So a lot of his guys are wide open.
A ton of time.
But there are some throws, like that was a very nice window throw right there.
It's a timing route.
With anticipation, in stride, and that's what we see in a lot of these. There's not a whole lot of guys that are waiting on the ball to come down to him. He's throwing in stride. yards after the catch, helping him. Very difficult throw there, as we see.
And you can
the
see
arm
himself
strength on the sideline route.
Buying himself time, which with UCLA's offensive line, one more time, getting out of those tackles, making throws.
I can see that happening at UCLA.
At UCLA.
He just made a falling down 20-yard throw. Not the most athletic guy, and not a guy because I don't think his frame's all that big that I want to run a lot, but it's nice to see that he has in-pocket mobility.
Yes, that's the big thing. His awareness is huge. And also on that list was Canton Kamatule. Going to Oregon, expected to play nearly immediately because of the lack of Eric Armstead, who declared early for the NFL. He is large. You got to see him out at the Under Armour, the All-Star game. And he appears to be, I think is he the biggest defensive recruit Oregon has had since Haloti Ngata? A 5-star defensive line recruit like that? It could
Maybe
be
Armstead, depending on what you
thought
he
was
was going to play.
He might have been a 5-star offensive tackle who played defense. But
he looks like somebody Bama or LSU signed.
Yes, he's about 6'7", 290. He should come in and they play that 3-4.
Next to Buckner.
Next to Buckner, should be a fantastic bookend. So Oregon, obviously, they can recruit. They always seem to get the offensive skill guys, and this year is no exception. And I think we should have Taj Griffin, which, if you haven't seen Taj Griffin run with the ball.
Oh, man. Now, this is a good team, and the right tackle here is actually going to USC, Chuma.
Okay,
but good.
Right. God, running behind him.
And he's got some jets.
Yeah. You mentioned
got angles. You had angles. You no longer have angles because he just,
You mentioned some guys without top end speed. This is not one of those guys.
And he gets there quickly, very quickly. I mean, he obviously had the leg injury, but I think he'll come back and be just fine.
And will not be asked to do anything early on with the depth
look at this cut. Okay, that's inside zone. He cuts it all the way outside the tight end. Misses, and I didn't mean to Berman there, but
it's okay.
And all the way back across the formation. He's just pretty ridiculous here.
He is a silly talent.
The agility and the ability to stop, start, and quickly reach that top end speed. Again, is what makes him so special.
Yes. So it's the Pac-12 should be loaded all over the place. How you feeling? We've been through a lot of conferences.
Yeah, I'm a little caffeinated.
You are. I'm feeling caffeinated myself. I don't know if I'm doing it on the right level, but another successful signing day. I think we have. Can we look at, we didn't talk about Big Ten, I believe, early impact guys. I believe we should have some of those just because we've got this awesome Iowa Navy hat up front.
This is the hat of the day.
Is it? It's great.
Look at this.
It does not belong to us. It belongs to Ryan Nanny. But maybe we don't have it. But
if you're a recruit and you want to commit to Iowa, and they didn't have a very good day.
You have to have that on
hand.
That
is the hat, right? You got to have that hat.
Give me one thing you learned this year. Biggie Marshall just did a music video to declare, but without that, other than that, one thing you learned covering recruiting, going to these camps, that you never thought was a reality.
Last year was a really special year for running. Not that was a reality. I think we're going to have an early signing day.
You think that's the trend
I think we saw so
forward.
many decommitments, and an early signing day really tells the kid, all right,
be serious.
If you are really committed to the school, show me on paper. Commit, around Thanksgiving and be done with it so that we can figure out who's actually in and who still wants to take visits and go see some places and who, and there's nothing wrong with it if you do, but you see these kids who are committed for 8-12 months and the term committed is thrown on very loosely in recruiting, but especially this year it seemed we had so many flips and guys just, I have a new leader each week and all this kind of stuff. An early signing day would really give some clarity as to what schools have a good foundation going into the holiday season and going into the
All-Star
final
games,
season.
Yes, and all that whole season. What is the most memorable thing about technology and recruiting from this cycle? Whether it's social media, whether it's huddle film, to you, what was funny, what was shocking, what was the new aspect of recruiting that you did not foresee?
I think the kids are choosing their huddle songs and their music better. I have to watch so many highlight tapes. Yes, I think in the past we've had some just terrible Southern rap, and at least now they're choosing a little bit better rap, which is good to listen to. And when you watch as many as I do, that's just very personal.
So you keep the music on?
Yeah, sometimes. Unless it's really bad or if I've heard the song like 8 times already. I'm like, mute button.
Okay. Who had the single best tape? Not necessarily who's the most talented, but whose tape to you was just like explosions over the ears that you were just like, this is just fun to watch?
Trent Thompson was just wrecked people.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be that size and just, it's like you had to rewind it a bunch of times because
he goes from point A to point B.
I was like, wait, hold on, he's pretty big. How did he teleport? It's like Liu Kang.
Yes.
Or Raiden, whoever.
Dawson did it in Street Fighter.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if somebody teleported in Mortal Kombat.
I thought it might have been Raiden.
You guys in the control room?
Control room.
Who?
Somebody played Mortal Kombat.
Did somebody teleport in Mortal Kombat? I totally forget if somebody teleported in Mortal Kombat. Oh no, somebody definitely did because they came up with the uppercut
Right.
out of the ground.
I think it's Raiden, but I'm not sure.
That sounds like it's right. He seems pretty mystical.
Okay, because Liu Kang had the down forward backpack high kick, dragon fatality.
Sure, absolutely, where
Right.
he was just kicking your face
Yeah.
over and over with both legs.
All
That's
right.
fair. I think that's a good place to end our signing day
Mortal Kombat,
coverage
yeah.
with Mortal Kombat
That's the
comparisons
fatality of the show.
to giant defensive. That is the fatality. It was Raiden. We did get confirmation.
Boom.
So
Lightning
Trent
bolts.
Thompson, congratulations. You're a giant, scarier version of a Mortal Kombat character, according to Bud Elliott. Thank you to everybody who watched both of our shows. We could not have done it without all of the guests that came on that imparted a ton of wisdom about signing day and the recruiting classes all over the country. My special thanks to everybody around the SB Nation Network, and of course, Bud Elliott. The man is a machine. There's a reason why we call this site Sports Bud Nation. Thank you, everybody, again for watching. We're going to put on our hats to close it out. Just because how do you have a bud without a hat?
True.
Thank you again. We will see you. We'll probably see you sooner than next year, but thank you for watching. Take it easy.